they gave us instructions about the microphone. I hope I do well. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's panel. It's about fighting loneliness in our digital world. My name is Anna Kirova. I'm the CEO of Field, the dating app for the curious. And I'm honored to be here with such an incredible group of people. I mean, come on. Thank you. We all know that technology has transformed how we connect, how we experience each other, and how close we get to people's lives. And yet, despite all of this connectivity, we feel extremely lonely these days and less connected than ever. So this loneliness, which is often tied to identity and marginalization, I'm sorry, I'm really stressed.
You got this.
Thank you, says the boss. Can make the challenge of meaningful connection even more complex than ever. So today I'm here with these incredible people to explore different perspectives and how we can tackle these challenges of feeling more connected and more together despite the challenges we face. At Field, we believe that connection is not just about finding others, it's also about finding oneself by being witnessed by other people. In our increasingly digital world, this is about how we show up authentically, how we make space for others to do the same, and how we can move beyond the surface to have deeper connections with each other. So my hope is that you can all take something today and feel a bit more connected to people. So with that, I want to start with some introductions, starting with Mina, who is a mental health educator with a focus on the intersection of growth, culture, and community. Mina is a therapist, author of Owning Our Struggles, and the founder of I'm So Mature, a media company bridging pop culture, music, and personal healing. Mina holds a graduate degree in social work from New York University and has worked across various mental health sectors, including early Head Start, private practice, and community mental health.
Hi, everyone.
ALOK, they, them, is a poet, comedian, public speaker, and actor. Their work, including Beyond the Gender Binary and Femme in Public, challenges societal norms and promotes inclusivity. ALOK has performed in over 40 countries, and their activism and cultural contributions have earned them numerous accolades, including the ACLU Bill of Rights Award. Hi. And Kesha is an undeniable pop icon with 10 top 10 singles, 2 #1 albums, 4 #1 songs on top 40 radio, and nearly 40 million followers across social media. The twice Grammy Award-nominated superstar attracts a diverse, passionate, and socially engaged global audience who believe in the messages behind her music, while critics also have unanimously sung her praises. Kesha's ventures outside of music include a top-rated TV program, an award-winning film, a book, a cruise, and a cosmetics line. Additionally, Kesha has been a staunch advocate for the LGBTQIA+ community and animal welfare through various organizations. 2023's Gag Order, which marked Kesha's first new album in over 3 years, was named Album of the Year by the Arts Desk, while also placing in the upper echelons of year-end charts from Rolling Stone, The Independent, Slant, and Sunday Times. To start, we're talking about loneliness, which is something we all intuitively understand in a personal way. I'd like to ask each one of you to give me your neatest definition of what that means for you, starting with you, Mina.
I would say when I think of loneliness, I think of disconnection. I believe that humans are biologically wired to be connected to people, and so that wiring is not there. And as a result of that, it leaves us feeling disconnected, it leaves us feeling alone, and it impacts our mental health.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. I would say loneliness is the precondition for love. Without loneliness, we wouldn't know that we needed each other. And I think what happens is we often pathologize loneliness rather than realizing that the issue isn't loneliness. the issues that we don't have rituals on what to do when we finally realize we're lonely. I think in my own life, it's been the situations where I'm most lonely that have been the most galvanizing to go and find someone else. And I think our truest form is when we're connected to one another. So in that way, loneliness is a friend, like a lighthouse that reconnects us back to one another.
I love that. Loneliness for me is something I used to fear so much, and the past year has been a really interesting year for me. And I've started to really become obsessed with my loneliness, and then I decided to become my own sugar daddy, so I now dom myself when I feel lonely. So it's been a really interesting ride for me and my loneliness.
Thank you so much for giving your perspectives. This shows how the experience of loneliness can be very different. And Mina, I'd like to ask you some questions around the different types of loneliness. In your work, you talk about emotional, social, and familial loneliness. Can you elaborate on the difference between those?
So emotional loneliness often happens when people feel like there is no emotional depth in their relationships. And so you feel like you know so many people. You might say, I have all of these friends, I'm always socializing with people, I'm always hanging out with people, but maybe you may notice that these are people you can't be vulnerable with. These are people that you're really scared to unmask yourself because there isn't mutual vulnerability in the relationship. Sometimes you might feel very afraid to be the first person to take that leap into being the vulnerable person in that relationship. You might also find that maybe some of your friends are more acquaintances, or the people that you're connecting with are your colleagues, but you don't have that depth to that relationship. And so I encourage people, if you do feel like you're missing that emotional depth, be the first person to literally jump off the diving board and be vulnerable. Talk about yourself, talk about your needs, express yourself, because sometimes we're waiting for the other person to tell us what's going on with them before we feel comfortable to share what's going on with us. And that's how we develop more deeper, intimate relationships. The number one thing I tell my clients is you can't hide and expect to be seen. And there are so many people who want to see you for you, but you have to take that leap. The next type of loneliness is more of that social loneliness, and I find that a lot of people may experience this when they notice that people in their friend group are going through different transitions. As we know, when the pandemic hit, a lot of people moved. And so the people that you frequently socialize with, and maybe those are the people that you had that emotional depth with, they're no longer physically near you. So it left you feeling like, I can't socialize with people anymore. I don't know who I can hang out with. I don't feel like I have a community that I exist in anymore. This can also happen, for example, where people are going through different stages in life, and people have children, and when people get married, and they're just experiencing different things, and now you're realizing, oh man, I have to adjust to this person's new life circumstances, and it can leave me feeling a little alone. And another form of loneliness, as you mentioned, is the familial, and that can be very common. A lot of us may know from experience that family is not always the safest space to be a part of, right? Our family of origin. And sometimes we can feel like we don't have the emotional depth that we're looking for with our family, meaning we can't talk about certain things, we don't feel safe being ourselves around our family members, but we also might be missing that social piece where your family may be living very far from you, and so as a result of both things, you might feel like there's a disconnection. So I find that what has worked for so many people is figuring out what your third spaces are. And in sociology, we talk about third spaces because our first space is our home space, our second space is our work environment, and third spaces are those social environments where you literally connect to meet people who you can then place into your circle of intimacy, create chosen families, and find different communities that you can socialize with. So those are the different forms of loneliness and some tools that you can utilize to try to combat that as well.
And when you talk about vulnerability, this reminds me of a lot of your work, Kesha, has been, and your presence has been about your vulnerability, your experiences, having your life, like a lot of your life visible. How do you navigate that? How do you stay true to yourself and find your people in all of that?
I think that when you're the most authentic, you will pull in the right energy. And so I've found when I write songs, the ones that are the most authentic, that have the lyrics that I'm the most scared to say out loud, like, those are the ones that connect the most because I'm daring to say something that we usually just keep in our heads. And like on my last album, Gag Order, there's this song that, quite frankly, I was going through a really dark time, and it was talking about how I didn't want to be here anymore. And that was the producer's favorite song on the album. It was a lot of my fans' favorite song on the album because it was a reflection of something that they have had a thought of, but I was saying it. So it's this really beautiful cycle when you're creative. The more authentic you are, the more vulnerable you are, the better the outcome. And people really, like, they see me in ways that I never planned on that many people, like, knowing my innermost thoughts, but here we are. And I do think it's like, I wouldn't change it, because I feel seen the more authentic I am. And it pulls in the right people.
And ALOK, you talk a lot about vulnerability too in your work and enabling people to show themselves, like Kesha was just talking. And a big part of what you talk about is spaces and safe spaces or safer spaces. What makes a space feel safe for people to be themselves? What are the signs of that?
So I grew up about 2 hours away from here, homo on the range, if you will. And I took science classes. I thought it would be a chic idea. So did the Texas government at that time. And we took anatomy classes, and we were taught that there's this thing called a human body. It's a discrete entity that has boundaries around skin. But the older I grew and the more I left this place, I realized that's not the true anatomy. The true anatomy is that between each one of our bodies, there's entire cosmos that connect us to one another. And that, in some ways, has taught me that friendship is an organ, just like a lung or a heart. And that in order to actually be full, we have to be connected to one another. And so actually, in many ways, loneliness is there because all of us know that we were meant for something so much more beautiful than whatever this is. Yikes. We were meant for a form of connection. And until we have that connection, we're going to feel lonely. And so what I think that we can do to make spaces where people are more vulnerable is to create spaces where people can actually be witnessed. Witnessing someone is different than seeing someone. Seeing someone means slotting someone into your pre-existent worldview, objectifying them, making them into a device for your own fantasies and projections. Witnessing someone is surrendering to the fact that you might never understand what someone's going through, but you love them anyways. And when people feel witnessed with curiosity and non-judgment, they bloom and they remember that the purpose of being alive is to do what flowers do, serve a look, and then die.
So true.
Beautiful. Thank you. I want to talk a bit more about, I guess there is the enabling side of a space, and then there are the boundaries. And you, Mina, you've emphasized the importance of building healthy boundaries as a form of self-care. In our digital world, where the constant connectivity can really blur the experience of what a boundary is, how can people navigate that? What are some tactics or practices that you can recommend?
Yeah, well, I think it's first important to define a boundary because I think social media has misconstrued the actual definition of what a boundary is. And so boundaries are the rules and guidelines that we impose on ourselves, where a rule is a boundary or a guideline or a request, that we impose on other people. right? So we're all here at South by Southwest, and there are rules, there are regulations, there are things that we have to follow, right? Those are guidelines that are being imposed on us. But when you talk about the digital space, a boundary really is asking myself, and you all asking yourself, what are the guidelines that I need to put on myself when it comes to the way I interact, when it comes to my cell phone device, or even just how I show up on social media. And so when we're talking about loneliness, right, sometimes it's really important to ask yourself, do you feel like the spaces that you're connected to online are spaces where you actually feel like you belong? And if it's not, what can you utilize? What functions can you use on your phone and your devices to really help you safeguard yourself and protect your peace from those things? I personally have all of my notifications turned off on all of my social media devices. I don't need to be alerted every time somebody likes a post or comments on a picture or DMs me, because for my own peace, I really don't want to be connected to my cell phone that often, right? And so a boundary really is about asking yourself, for my own peace, for my own mental health, what are the rules and guidelines that I need to impose so that I can have a healthier relationship to this digital space that I'm actually utilizing to create community and connection. I think even as creators, or even if you are someone who is a user on these platforms as well, thinking about interactions, thinking about things that are worth responding to, things that require your attention. Is it necessary to engage in arguments online, right? Is that really gonna help your mental health, or is that going to disrupt your mental health? And it's about asking yourself that question: what is the healthiest choice for me right now? What does my mind need? What does my body need? And maybe I need to create some sense of disconnection, or whatever that boundary is.
And in what you just said, I heard a lot about, I guess, what we think is expected of us. There is a sense of, I need to be always on, I need to be reacting, I need to be present. And this makes me think of a lot of the stuff that you've spoken about, ALOK, around societal norms and how we have to unlearn a lot. Where does that line go between all of these perceptions we have of what is expected of us, how that affects our isolation, and then how we can actually bloom into being a truer self and more authentic?
I'm about to tell you a secret. Don't tell anyone, as in gossip to the entire world. The closet is not just for gay people. It's just that gay people were honest that we were closeted. Everybody's closeted. And I learned this growing up here. Everybody plays pretend. They all walk around saying, I am, even though they have no idea who they are. And what they're often saying is, I want to make you feel comfortable, so I'm going to contort myself into who I think that you want me to be. That is a form of injury that I, as a poet, could spend eons trying to write and never articulate. The pain of feeling like the only way you can belong is by betraying yourself and shape-shifting, knowing that that love is dependent on your self-disappearance. And I think that the reason that trans people like me inspire so much envy, which is a synonym for transphobia, is because people look at us and they say, what do you mean you get to be free now? I thought we had to play pretend. I thought we had to play hide and seek our entire lives. And trans people have the moral fortitude and clarity to look at the world and say, no, this is who I am becoming. And that's different than I am, because it recognizes that the blooming process is active, not passive. We're constantly metamorphosizing and becoming a fuller and freer version of ourselves every day. Freedom comes from the last choice we make, and most people keep on making a choice to be constricted. So the way forward, I think, is ask yourself, when presented with the next choice, how can I make a better choice to be a little bit more me? And that might feel like the scariest thing you've ever done before. It might feel like going rogue. It might feel terrifying. But what I'm here to say is, as an ambassador from the other side of terror, that's where freedom lives.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you a bit more about your journey to be more authentic, Kesha. Like you were talking about your, and I don't want to like ask you a lot of questions about each song, but what inspired you to step towards that authenticity? Did you have a community that held you? Who were you witnessed by? How did people around you change your ability to feel safer to express yourself?
Well, so I have, much like probably any person, have had periods of my life that felt very safe, and then I have had some periods of my life that felt very unsafe. So while not feeling safe, that was really hard, and I felt like I was dying inside for a very long period of time. So about exactly a year ago, I regained the rights to my own voice and my name in the universe. And when I got that like punctuated phone call that was like, in 3 months' time, you're gonna be free. And I just had gotten so used to not being free. And I was like, oh, fuck, okay. I'm gonna look at everything in my entire life. And I have a reminder in my phone every day. You are free. Are you behaving like a free woman? Are you following your joy? Because I just got so used to shutting that part of my brain off. It wasn't up to me. But my mom was very supportive in me being authentic, and my family. I'm very lucky for that. But I also hung out with a bunch of scummy punk kids. They will let you be free. We love them, like growing up. And quite honestly, having my fans be so supportive and like they do witness me, and I'm so authentic for them because it's this beautiful symbiotic relationship where the more free I am, the more permission they have to be free too. And so it's this amazing giving relationship of like us supporting each other, being as free as humanly possible. When I play shows, I want to make it so safe. And I just want people to be so free, and it lights me up. I feel like it's my life's work, is creating a safe space for people to come and be authentic, because the world can be a nasty place. So I love being able to create a space for a couple of hours that people can come and just be so fucking authentic. It feels so good I get to witness that. So, I mean, honestly, in my shows, it's magical.
Kesha, I wanted to love up on you for a second.
Please.
You know, when I was a young faggot, I know it's hard to imagine, your first album was like injecting freedom for so many of us, queer kids growing up in the South. And before we even knew who we were, we could dance to your music and feel free and uninhibited. And I can only imagine how painful it is to have to channel that for so many people. And I just wanted to say thank you for continuing to show up, because that symbiotic relationship is so powerful and true.
Oh my God, thank you. It's not always easy showing up authentically. Sometimes, like, I understand the loneliness and social media, you want to show up perfectly. But that is crippling. That makes you lonelier when you feel like you have to show up perfectly. You just have to show up. Sorry.
No, I'm actually curious to know how this manifests in the online world for you. How does that enable or, as you said, cripple you, your presence online?
I find the judgment piece is really difficult. I don't give a fuck anymore. I've been doing this so long. But like at the beginning, my God, it was pretty heartbreaking that you would just write a song and people seem to like it and you go sing it, and then people would just tell you how fucking talentless and horrible and ugly and not deserving and worthless, and you can't sing, you can't write, like that for years. It like did a number, honestly. But I can sing and I can write and everybody can fuck off, so. But it took me a minute. More. It took me a minute, yeah.
Thank you for that. Mina, you talk a lot about how loneliness is rooted in lack of belonging. How can digital spaces be designed to support or create a sense of belonging?
You know, this was a very powerful moment that happened right here. And I'm going to answer this, Anna. But I want to, because this is the bridge to the question in the context of what you just said, ALOK, is so powerful, right? Everyone is closeted. And I think that there are so many people who don't feel audacious enough to be exposed that it's like, how dare you be audacious enough to be the thing that I've been trying to be for so long? And it's the same thing when you talk about judgment, right? That's a lot of projection happening. And I think this happens a lot on digital spaces where you'll see people purposefully follow creators, follow artists, follow people that deeply they're thinking to themselves, I really wish someone in my life gave me permission to be this thing, but because I never got it, there's this deep anger, and it's easier for me to be a mean person, to talk down, to belittle, to criticize, to judge. And I say that because it's really important for us to be very mindful of how we're showing up, because we're saying digital spaces, but users are human beings. And so we really have to just be very mindful when we're thinking about digital spaces, because it's actual human beings that are playing a role in how these spaces function. And if you are not managing your own internalized oppression, because you oppress yourself every day, it is going to be easy to come into spaces like this and say, now I'm going to oppress you because I don't know freedom. I don't exist in freedom. And now I have easy access to follow a bunch of people online and try to suppress their freedom as well. Because in my own personal life, I've never given myself permission. Maybe my family will reject me if I give myself permission, and I am so afraid of being alone that it's easier for me to just be mean. It's safer to be mean, right? And so I just think it's really important as we talk about this connection between loneliness and the digital world to remember the role we play as active users in these digital spaces, and recognizing too that, yes, we want developers to be very mindful of the type of apps that they create or digital spaces that they create, but what are you bringing to the table as a user? Are you bringing empathy? Are you bringing compassion? Are you bringing kindness, mutual vulnerability? Are you bringing that as well to this space that you say you want to exist in, and then also create pure connections with other people? So it's just really important for us to just be very mindful that we still have a great sense of agency. I know with everything going on in the world, sometimes we feel powerless, but we do have power. You are not a powerless person. And so it's very important to be mindful of how you're exercising your power, because you can have the power to oppress people. You can have the power to hurt people. And so you have to ask yourself, is this what I actually want to do with my power, right? What does that gain? What do I gain from that? So if I can have the power to come into spaces and say, well, I want to be authentic, how do I practice authenticity in this space? How do I allow myself to be witnessed in this space? But also, how do I manage my biases? The things that I've been taught for a very long time regarding how to see people, especially people who don't live life the way that I live or look the way that I look. How can I learn to coexist in these types of realms? Because the digital space, no matter how AI progresses or whatever comes, human beings are active users here. And so you also have to take responsibility regarding how you show up.
And I think ALOK is a great example of this. I know the way that you respond and react to some horrible messages on your post is always with so much grace and so much kindness and love. Where do you find that from, and how does that, what is the feeling of that?
Well, Kesha and I were just bonding about being water signs backstage, so to any water signs in the crowd, I see you. Yes. I've always felt things really deeply, And in some ways, I feel like I can often feel things that people don't allow themselves to feel. And I can understand the toll that it's taken to have to hide, because it's a lot of work. A lot of times people ask me, how do you have the courage to be yourself? And I ask, how do you have the stamina to keep hiding? It's so much energy. And all that energy could be made available into like making art and like dancing and doing an eyeliner tutorial. You know, there's so many more interesting things to do. And so what happens when I receive hatred from other people is I pause and I love on that hatred. And I look at it and I'm like, okay, this person could be doing all of those things, having a picnic, dancing to a Kesha song, and instead they are choosing to waste their precious time on earth with me. They want my company. They are making the choice to engage with me because they want my company. Aww. And as we say in Texas, bless your heart. Bless your heart, because you think that this is going to offer you salvation. You think that this is going to rescue you from your self-torment, like it's going to be some bridge out of your self-hatred. It's not. And so the way that I learn to love the people who hate me is I see myself in them and I say, I'm cruel to me too, but shaming myself doesn't make me less cruel. Loving myself does, so I love them back. And I say to you, I love you. And then when you tell someone who's hating on you that you love them, something happens. Something shifts. You become a mirror and they have to see themselves. And I think we keep on pursuing a lot of activism out of a place of righteousness, wanting to be better than someone else, wanting to one-up someone, political purity. I think that's very boring. I think that the reason I want to change the world is because I love people. And so I understand that homophobes, transphobes, racists are not the problem. Homophobia, transphobia, racism are the problem. I'm soft with people and I'm tough with systems. And I recognize that in the world that I'm creating, there's a world where that person needs to be there too, and I need them too. So the way that we resist and make prejudice obsolete is we love so ardently that they have to face the fact, like, why was I wasting my time hating? There's so many other better things I could be doing.
I want to talk a bit about this idea of chosen families. And you were talking a bit about how your family and your fans and your community, Kesha, have helped you. Would you say that you have a chosen family of your own, a community that carries you?
Oh, 100%. This past year, I had to like fall in love with myself again and like really get to know who I am now. And like really look around and see who I'm surrounded by. And I absolutely have a chosen family. My fans, of course, and the queer community, period. But I also just started doing things that light me up. And through that, I ended up on a naked hippie commune. And I made some of my chosen family there, but my band, my dancers, the people I write songs with, musicians, like, I do think that when you start to really like love yourself and pay attention to yourself and listen to yourself and do what you love, and for me, behave like a free woman, my chosen family comes to me. It's like all an energetic exchange, and I'm so grateful because we're like a little team of warriors that just want each and every one of us to be our freaky little selves, like to the utmost of our ability. But yeah, I do have a big, beautiful chosen family.
And Mina, how does one go about getting there? Like, how does one go about finding such people? Or what are the signs? What is the feeling that you are being witnessed as you are? How can people navigate that?
I think when it comes to, for example, safety, we all have to define what makes us feel safe. And so I think that is the starting point. Asking yourself, when you are in interpersonal relationships, what are the things that make you feel seen and witnessed? What does vulnerability look like? What does psychological safety look like? Meaning, do I feel like I'm around people that see me, that hear me, they respect me? Do I feel like I have a community of people that are actually supporting me as well? And when we have those things in place, it can help us feel more deeply connected to other people. Now, when it comes to figuring out where your chosen family can exist, I really like to help people understand the concept of community care through the circle of support. Because a lot of people hear community care and they think that means I need to make more friends, and that's not necessarily what that is. Our community care pretty much is your circle of support where there are 4 different domains, and it's your circle of intimacy, circle of friendship, circle of participation, and your circle of exchange. So when you think of your circle of intimacy, that is where your chosen family can be. Again, some of us, our family of origin may not be the safest place. And so when you're thinking of your circle of intimacy, for me personally, I think about if a friend says they're coming over, I'm not washing the dishes, I'm not cleaning up, you're just gonna see the mess in my house because we're so intimate, we're so close that I'm not performing for you. There is no need for me to put on a mask. You're just gonna see me as my full self. Now, when it comes to your circle of friendship, a number one thing that I really encourage people to be remembering is that friendship falls on a spectrum. And when we're lonely, we can crave friendship so deeply that it's easy to believe that whoever I meet must be a close friend. And I think it's really important to just allow friendship to fall on a spectrum where you invite in acquaintances, you invite in if you have a relationship with your colleagues, and allow that to flourish into something deeper. As I always say, if you are looking to build connections, don't go into spaces thinking, how can I leave here with a friend? Think to yourself, how can I leave here with a connection? Because friendship comes from connection first. And when we're strangers, we want to figure out, how can I be more intimate with you? But there is a starting point there, right? Now, your third domain is your circle of participation. This is your circle of participation. It is the networks that we participate in that actually allows us to make friends and make acquaintances, and eventually those people can come into our circle of intimacy. I ask you to also think about, what are your standards in regards to intimacy? Because me and you may have watched the whole season of Paradise, and we talking about the last episode, woo, what an episode, but that don't mean that we about to be best friends just because you like to watch Paradise. Right? That's not my standard. There's more that you have to bring to the table. So when we think about our circle of participation, it's just like those different networks that we participate in that allow us to meet people. Your last domain is your circle of exchange, which is your paid and professional networks. I'm a therapist, so that means I exist in my client's circle of exchange. I don't exist in their circle of friendship. I may exist maybe to some extent in their circle of intimacy because they're sharing certain things with me, but there is a boundary. I'm their therapist, and it's a professional relationship, right? And so when we can think of community through that extent, we can figure out, okay, these are my friends, but these people here, our relationship is so deep, it's so intimate, that this is actually my chosen family. Because these are the people that can see me at my worst. These are the people that show up for me, they support me, they care for me. And there's this openness between us that actually helps me feel safe mentally and psychologically. And so those are the ways that we can really be thinking about the concept of community care, but also the concept of chosen families.
And thank you for all this. It's a really useful framework I was even mapping my own relationships. I wonder when, let's say, a person wants to start this journey of authenticity, so they open themselves up and start looking for these connections. What are first steps? Like, you're talking a lot about ALOK, that, of course, everyone's in the closet, and how can you have so much stamina? But let's say someone's used to this their whole life, being hidden. That's where they feel safe. How can they channel that energy they spend on that towards stepping into being themselves?
Welcome to therapy, everyone. So we often only understand change as cataclysmic. People want the world that we want now. But if we're very honest, change is so slow and so invisible that often we only notice it on the other side. And we have to develop a form of higher intelligence, which is perceiving change as it's happening. And that takes a lot of work. So what I am always asking people to do is to microdose. Microdose on freedom. Microdose on a version of yourself that you've always wanted to be. When we jump and leap there, often we get afraid and we retreat. When we microdose, we're able to actually experiment, practice, template, play, and then edge ourselves ever closer to where we needed to go. So the first thing I would say is jealousy is the best compass. Who are you jealous of? Who are you judging? Because there's knowledge there about a place that your soul wants to expand. Listen to that jealousy and say, oh, thank you for teaching me where I want to go. And then microdose on the thing that you're judging in other people. And it's going to feel uncomfortable and contrary to who you thought you were, but on the other side, you're going to feel so much more space. And when you keep on making that next better choice, and notice I didn't say best, I said better, that next better choice, on the other side, you're going to become the person you wanted to be. So rather than before and after, rather than tragedy and triumph, rather than man and woman, rather than all these binaries we're taught, I'm about being in process with one another. I believe fundamentally that living a life is the process of composing a love poem. And the joy of being a poet is that I realize that actually I only know when I'm done after the fact. I have to trust my intuition and just keep on going. So live your life like that, compose a sonnet.
I have to ask Kesha now about your experience of expressing yourself over the last few years, especially as you've been regaining your freedom. What have been the signs that you are authentic and you are yourself?
I think it's just a feeling. It's really having to trust yourself, which, you know, it's hard. Women, we're not like necessarily shoved in the direction of just trusting ourselves. It's like, oh, you're crazy if you even say that. It feels like I would second guess my intuition for most of my life. And now it's all I listen to. I just listen to myself. It was much more convenient for everyone around me for me to not listen to myself at all. And I wanted to, you know, make everybody happy. But now I just listen to myself, and I try to be polite about that to everybody else, but I've gotten really good at listening to my intuition, which took a lot of loneliness, which is why when you first asked about loneliness, I was so scared of loneliness, and now that's where I reconnect with myself, and we like recalibrate, and we decide what feels good and what doesn't, and who we want around and who we want to kick out of our circle. Like, me and myself have a really good thing going on now. But it's all about like trusting yourself, which can be hard when there's so much chaos in the world around us, in our phones, in our minds. There's just chaos everywhere. So I had to, like, I literally went to a hippie commune for a month and sat in the woods. That's how I did it. I'm not saying that's for everyone, but that's like how I really reconnected to myself and learned to listen.
There's a really interesting daily practice a coach I work with gave me a couple years ago that's changed my life. It has to do with trust. It's a daily reflection of what would you do if you trusted yourself today? And it blew my mind, like asking myself that question every day. The kinds of things that I've been suppressing were just from the trivial to life-changing. So it is a journey. I wanted to bring it to the online world and ask you, Mina, I think the digital world can be dangerous and overwhelming, but it can also be really enabling for a lot of people. How can people use the digital spaces and use the communities that exist out there to practice connection in a meaningful way?
I think it's really all about, I love what you just said, that microdosing. really taking those small, intentional steps regarding how to connect with other people. I think, as ALOK said, sometimes we feel like we have to throw ourselves out there instead of figuring out what is just one small interaction that I want to make today? What's one thing that I want to learn about someone today? Or what's one truth about myself that I may want to share with other people? Instead of feeling like you maybe have to share your diary on the internet today, right? I think it's really all about being very intentional, but also asking yourself, what are you hoping to gain in return? Are you looking maybe for relatability? Are you looking for other people who can relate to things that what you're going through, because maybe this is something that this is an issue that you're looking to connect with others, to be more vulnerable with others around this particular topic. Maybe it's a form of self-discovery. Maybe you're posing a question or asking certain questions because you want to find other people who may have the same interests as you or may have the same struggles as you, right? And so I think it's really all about being very intentional about how you show up, but also asking yourself, what is the goal? Because sometimes you might realize maybe this isn't something that I bring to the internet. Maybe this is too sacred for me, or maybe I'm just not ready to be fully exposed, and that's also okay if you realize that actually this still feels a little scary. And maybe this is something I bring to my in-person connections before I go searching for a community online regarding this one particular thing. So it's about being very intentional. It's about using that term ALOK just said, microdosing, and asking yourself, it could just be one small thing. It doesn't have to be a diary entry of issues that I bring to the internet or topics or ideas. It could just be one question that I pose. It could be one creator that I look up to, that I interact with their content in a particular type of way. But just be very intentional about what you're doing, but also ask yourself, what is the goal behind it? Because it can influence the way you show up. It can also influence if the online space is where you even want to take this.
There's a quote I read today that technology can be a really good servant, but a very dangerous master. And I think that's probably where it goes to. It's how do we use it intentionally and remember that it's in our control at the end of the day. I think for young people growing up native to technology, the situation is a little different. I think a lot of self-expression flows online just naturally. It's difficult to build a personal, like an experience of the self in the real world. How could one cope with that, starting from that point?
You know, it's really different generationally, where we have to be very mindful that social media isn't going anywhere. AI isn't going anywhere. These digital spaces are actually growing. I do think that self-discovery can happen in a digital world, but I think there's still power in allowing it to happen offline as well. I think about, for millennials, especially older millennials too, right? Some of the experiences that a lot of us had may have been in person, and we didn't necessarily have Instagram or TikTok or these places to run and share these particular experiences with. But now that we do have that within our culture, there are times where if people are sharing certain experiences online, it can feel as if, oh my gosh, I'm missing out because this didn't happen for me. I didn't get this opportunity. I'm not a part of this particular community. A lot of us know FOMO, this fear of missing out on opportunities, fear of missing out on connection, even fear of missing out on love. And so I do think that it's one of those things that, to be very honest, we're still exploring. And I think there has to be a willingness to explore and be open to seeing the direction the online culture goes, because I don't think it's all bad, but sometimes it's not all good. But it's about finding that middle ground, being open to the gray area, being open to the nuances of online culture, and really figuring out how do we balance the importance of online culture, but also there's still so much value in the human touch. During the pandemic, for example, so many people experienced something called touch deprivation, which is a form of skin hunger, where because we were isolated, the lack of a hug, the lack of a kiss, the physical, actual connection, impacted their mental health deeply because we are literally biologically wired to be physically around people. Early childhood attachment, we're so used to seeing it between a child bonding with their caregiver and thinking, oh, well, that kid's 18 now, you're on your own. You don't need any kind of attachment. You don't need the hug, you don't need the nurturing, but we actually need that. And so I think it's really all about figuring out the value in how do I find these online communities, and also how do I find these in real life connections that still exist, that's nurturing us from the inside out and actually is helping us care for our well-being.
And I think in a lot of what you're saying, I hear that we need to lean into discomfort in some ways. There is a level of discomfort that's actually healthy and it's good, and we need to navigate that. How does one navigate that, ALOK?
Well, what I've done in my life, I don't know if it'll work for you, is I do a thing that is really painful, and then I call my friends to debrief. So there is no discomfort without a debrief. And I think debriefing is genuinely better. I mean, I know we're on a panel, whatever, but the debrief is gonna be better than the panel. You know what I'm saying? Like, because in the debrief, you thought you pulled back the mask, but in the debrief, you're really pulling back the mask. So I'll do something, and while I'm afraid, I'm like, oh, at least I can talk to my friends about it after the fact. And so then it feels like they're with me energetically. Because I just think it's a lot to expect people to do things alone. Like, I don't know, maybe I make decisions collectively all the time. And it's really comforting to know that you're part of a collective of people who are championing you and rooting for you and wanting you to grow. So what I would say is, find your people.
And I think you find your people by being your most authentic self, as much as you can bear.
I think we have to move towards a close, and I would like to invite each one of you to share with our audience one thing you'd like them to take away today. Starting with you.
Just one thing. The importance of being connected. The importance of connecting to people, whether it is through the digital space or online. And just to add to what ALOK just shared, that comment around like doing something really hard and then calling your friends, that's a form of co-regulation. That is when we use someone else's nervous system to balance out our own nervous system when we're experiencing fight, flight, or freeze. And so practice co-regulation, but you need to be connected to people to practice co-regulation.
What I would say is that the state of Texas is pursuing discrimination against trans and gender nonconforming people like me. And so if you were inspired by what I'm saying, if you thought I was funny or charming, know that this might be illegal for me to exist in public with you now. And so these are not hypothetical moments where we can draw inspiration from one another. I need your help, and my community needs your help to champion trans rights everywhere that you go. And part of the way that we end loneliness is we don't see these issues as other people's issues. Oh, I'm not trans, I don't know a trans person. It's actually saying, if there is an injustice to anyone, that is an injustice to me as well. And the way that we create a better world is when we don't allow people to project this stranger danger. Trans people are not your enemy.
And I'm with you too. I know that probably a lot of people in this room would say that. But what I would say, try to connect yourself as authentically as you can, and the things that scare you the most, lean into that. And like, my problem solving for everything is just to create. I would try to see if you can create some sort of art out of whatever pain you hold inside of you, because that's saved my life many, many times. And I foresee that it will save my life many more times. So I just highly encourage everybody to take whatever is living inside of you that feels like it's rotting you from the inside and create art out of that. It's very therapeutic. And I think Americans should have more sex. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for all this. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.